Imagine being shipwrecked on a barren island with no fresh water, no trees, and no hope of rescue, surrounded only by blazing heat, raging cyclones, and an endless sea that swallows every attempt to escape. Now imagine enduring not days or months, but 15 long years in that prison of sand and coral, clinging to life with nothing but seabirds, turtles, and the will to survive. This is not a legend, nor a forgotten tale spun from myth, but the real history of Tromelin Island, a desolate speck in the Indian Ocean where tragedy, cruelty, and resilience collided in one of the most haunting survival stories ever recorded. In 1761, a French shipwreck left nearly 200 souls stranded on this unforgiving patch of reef. But when rescue finally came, only 7 women and 1 infant remained alive. How did they survive against impossible odds? Why were they abandoned for so long? And what secrets did archaeologists uncover centuries later about their lives on this island of despair? This story is not just about survival, it is about betrayal, endurance, and the extraordinary strength of the human spirit in the face of abandonment. On July 31st, 1761, the French ship Lutil sailed under the command of Captain Jean de la Fargue, a man in a hurry, a man carrying both official cargo and a secret human cargo hidden deep within the hold. The ship had been ordered to collect provisions for the colony of Île-de-France, known today as Mauritius, but against the law and against all orders, the captain and merchants had also decided to smuggle 160 enslaved Malagasy people from Madagascar to be sold into bondage. That night, the winds rose strong, the currents twisted unpredictably, and Captain Jean was left peering at 2 contradictory maps of the Indian Ocean that showed different coastlines, different reefs, and different hazards, with no clarity as to which could be trusted. Instead of slowing down and waiting for dawn, the captain pressed forward into darkness with sails full, his men on edge, and the waves rising higher with every hour. Shortly after midnight, the inevitable happened when the hull of Lutil slammed into a jagged reef near a lonely sandbank that appeared suddenly out of the darkness. The ship shuddered, the masts splintered, and water rushed into the hold where the enslaved Malagasy were chained. Many drowned instantly, trapped below decks in iron shackles, screaming into the rising water as the French crew scrambled onto the deck and into the night. By the time the sea swallowed what remained of the vessel, 120 French sailors and 60 to 80 Malagasy captives had clawed their way onto the low sandbank now known as Tromelin Island. But how could they possibly survive on a barren sandbank with no trees, no water, and no way to leave? The survivors soon realized their situation was almost hopeless, because Tromelin was no lush tropical refuge, but a flat and windswept patch of coral reef, barely 1 square kilometer in size, with no trees, no rivers, no shade, and no fresh water. The island lay exposed to the relentless Indian Ocean sun by day, battered by cyclones during the storm season, and covered only with scrub brush, seabirds, and the occasional turtle crawling across the sand. The French crew immediately set about salvaging what they could from the wreck of their ship, dragging wood, sails, and food casks ashore, but they guarded their supplies fiercely and offered little to the Malagasy, who had also survived. The Malagasy men and women, left with nothing but their bare hands and desperation, began digging crude shelters from coral rock and sand, fashioning places to crouch against the searing heat and salt winds, while they learned to survive on seabirds, turtles, and fish pulled from the shallows. 2 societies quickly formed on the same island, one armed and in control of the wreckage, the other left abandoned to fight for survival with scraps and ingenuity. But the French sailors had no intention of staying, and their next move would seal the fate of the Malagasy for the next 15 years. As the days passed, the French first officer, Barthélemy Castellan du Vernet, realized that their only chance of true escape was to build a new vessel from the remains of the wreck, a desperate plan that would require every plank and spar that could be scavenged. For 2 months, the French sailors worked to construct a makeshift schooner, which they named La Providence, hammering broken beams together, sealing gaps with tar, and shaping a crude hull from wreckage. The Malagasy watched as the vessel took form, hoping that perhaps they too would be taken when the time for departure came. But when the schooner was finally ready, the French sailors made a choice that would forever stain their history. On the morning of departure, the French crew boarded the Providence and sailed away into the horizon, leaving the Malagasy people stranded on Tromelin with nothing but a vague promise that someone would one day return for them. In truth, the captain himself soon died after reaching Mauritius, and the colonial governor refused to authorize a rescue mission, declaring that resources could not be spared during the ongoing 7 Years' War with Britain. But what the French abandoned as hopeless, the Malagasy would transform into one of the greatest survival stories in history. Alone on the barren island, the Malagasy survivors faced a reality that seemed impossible, yet through resilience, ingenuity and sheer willpower, they endured. They built sturdier shelters from coral blocks, binding them with sand and clay, and they created ovens from stone, where they baked what little food they could find. They fashioned tools from copper scraps and nails salvaged from the wreck, reshaping broken metal into knives, hooks, and pots that allowed them to catch and cook fish. With no cloth to wear, they plucked feathers from seabirds and stitched them into makeshift clothing, creating garments that shielded them from sun and storm alike. Each day was a test of endurance, because food was scarce. Water had to be caught in pits dug into the sand during rare rainfalls, and storms could sweep across the island with waves so high that they threatened to wash away every shelter. Some of the survivors tried to escape by building rafts of wood and rope, setting out into the endless ocean in hopes of reaching Madagascar or Mauritius, but none of those who left were ever seen again, their fates claimed by the merciless sea. One by one, the numbers of the stranded Malagasy dwindled, as hunger, disease, storms, and despair claimed lives slowly over the passing years. And yet, after 15 years, when help finally came, the rescuers would be stunned to find who had managed to survive. It was not until November 1776 that a French warship, La Dauphine, under the command of Captain Jacques-Marie Boudin de Tromelin, finally sailed across the reef and anchored off the desolate island. When the landing party came ashore, they found not the dozens who had once been abandoned, but only 7 women and a single infant, the last remnants of a people who had survived the unforgiving island for 15 years. The survivors were thin, weathered, and dressed in feather garments, but they were alive, standing amidst the ruins of stone shelters and ovens they had built with their own hands, proof of an endurance few in history could rival. The captain took them aboard La Dauphine, carried them to Mauritius, and unlike the fate that might once have awaited them, these survivors were freed, granted citizenship, and offered new lives. But centuries later, archaeologists would return to Tromelin to uncover physical proof of how these people endured, and what they found was nothing short of extraordinary. They uncovered the remnants of stone shelters, the ovens where food was baked, and copper bowls repaired again and again with ingenious care. They unearthed jewelry, bone tools, and combs that spoke of women maintaining dignity even in isolation, of families trying to preserve identity in the face of despair. Every artifact told the story of people who refused to vanish quietly, who created culture and society on an island that should have been their grave. But what do these discoveries mean for us today, and what legacy has Tromelin left behind? The story of Tromelin Island stands as a testament not only to survival, but also to the cruelty of colonial greed. For it was greed that placed enslaved people aboard that ship, greed that abandoned them to die, and indifference that left them forgotten for 15 years. Yet it is also a story of resilience and adaptation, because against the most hostile environment, a small group of people endured storms, hunger, and isolation, and in doing so they left behind one of the most powerful survival stories in human history. Today, Tromelin remains uninhabited, a windswept speck of coral patrolled only by seabirds and researchers, but its legacy has transformed it from an island of abandonment into a symbol of memory, dignity, and endurance. The tale of the survivors is a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of history, the human spirit can shine against the odds, and that those forgotten by the powerful may still leave a legacy that endures through centuries. This was the forgotten survival story of Tromelin Island, where abandoned lives turned despair into resilience, and where the voices of the lost continue to echo across time. If you want to explore more stories of forbidden travel, lost civilizations, and forgotten histories, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because the past still holds secrets that wait to be uncovered, and the next story might reveal something even more mysterious than this one.